Joining me now is Democratic pollster and Managing Director of Research at Purple Strategies, Margie Omero, and Media Matters Senior Fellow Eric Boehlert, who is also more liberal than Nixon, or Nixon's more liberal than you.
Yes.
I don't really care. But what we're getting at here is the data back up, the anecdotes, all the way up to the candidate level there, Hillary and Barack, not wanting to say they're liberal.
Right. Well, it's been a branding campaign almost for 40 years now. I mean, and it starts really with Agnew going after the liberal media. I mean, and that became a cornerstone of the conservative movement. Jimmy Carter, Michael Dukakis, you saw the clip with President Bush there. So I think it's been a campaign to make it a dirty word for a long time. Today, of course, with Fox News and right-wing media, the echo chamber, I mean, that's up. They've turned it up to 11. I mean, it's an insult.
Isn't it striking that it goes all the way out to all the people who are holding these liberal views, and they think they're moderates? What's the political consequence of that?
Well, I don't know. It depends on how they vote. If they keep voting the same way, it doesn't really have a political consequence. But I think a lot of it, the flip side is on the conservative side, they've always been very proud because, again, you have national leaders who call themselves conservatives, as that clip showed. Not a lot of national Democrats run around the country calling themselves liberal, so it feeds down. So there's the right-wing attack, there's the media attack, and then there are the political implications from the Democratic Party, I think.
Margie, your thoughts on all of this, and then also the polarization numbers in this report?
Sure. Well, the Pew study shows that there are actually more people who have consistently liberal views. That's a trend that's been going on. It mirrors nearly identically a trend that's going on the right. But I should just clarify that polarization is just for people who self-identify as either Democrats or Republicans. A majority of Americans have these mixed views that are sometimes liberal and sometimes conservative. The issue is that the most politically engaged voters are those on each of the extreme. And on top of that, which Pew really finds troubling, and I find troubling too, it's not just the views, it's that people have a lot of animosity for the other side. They don't want their family members to marry someone who's of the opposite party. They don't want to socialize with people who are of the opposite party.
Right, which is bonkers.
Right, and it reflects, I mean, here's the implication, is that it reflects, whether it's the cause or the effect, greater polarization in Congress. And so when you have people, whether they're political activists or representatives, who really don't like the other side, aren't trying to understand the other side, it completely paralyzes our political process.
Yeah, and I'm not sure that it has to have a reflection in Congress, Margie, in the sense that there's all sorts of ways that Congress doesn't reflect what people want or think or do, so this may or may not be reflective. And yet, for our body politic, for our civil society, I would say, if you want to be idealistic, it's concerning. And the numbers show that 27% of Democrats and 36% of Republicans say the people in the other party are actually a threat to the nation's well-being, a threat. Now, some will say, oh, it's a little worse for Republicans, and that may reflect ideology or their media diet. But what jumped out to me about that was 1 out of 4, 1 out of 3. That's really disconcerting for a society.
Right. I mean, it really means, and I think this is important for us all to take into account, all think about, that it really means that people are having a hard time understanding where the other side is coming from. So putting yourself in your opponent's shoes and trying to find middle ground. And when I say it reflects what's going on in Washington, studies also show, including Pew's own analysis, that members of Congress are more polarized. So what's happening is that no one's really able to come to the table. And certainly you saw that now with Eric Cantor's loss. You're going to continue to see the repercussions of that. It's all part of the same growing trend. And unfortunately, the polarization piece is happening on the left as well as on the right.
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting point, and one we'll have to continue to explore. I've been reporting on this program why Eric Cantor's loss was not only about right versus far right. It was also top down. It was also out of touch. The economic angles there were super interesting, even if they're not traditionally progressive. But what do you think of the polarization piece here? You're not someone who's associated with being concerned that members of Congress need to play more golf together and eat more steak.
Well, but I think the good news is if you look at particular agendas, immigration, raising the minimum wage, extending unemployment, doing something about climate change, there's massive gun laws. There's massive agreement that Congress should be doing these things. But I think, you know, Republicans block everything, and the press sort of plays that, you know, these two parties can't do anything, when in fact there's really one that's an absolute roadblock. That leads to the perception that we are so polarized. But the good news is I think there is lots of overlap on key issues.
Right. And Eric, before we go here, let me make a challenge to you. We are here in Manhattan. We are not far from Fox News. Would you be willing to walk over there and hug somebody?
I would.
You would?
I would.
All right. Margie, we'll look into your challenge next time. Thank you both for being here tonight, Margie Omero and Eric Boehlert. Coming up, you'd expect Texas